All I remembered at that point was finding myself alone. Oh, my head. Where was I? It was so dark. There was something by my feet. A flashlight. Alright, let's look around here. Let's see. Door. That house. Where was I? There was a body lying on the floor. Who was it? I didn't recognize his face. He was still kind of warm. Come here, cat. Freaking meow at me. The desk had a computer and some papers on it, and a single drawer. I didn't want to snoop, but yes. Receipts, pens, and a blurry photo. Looked like a store of some kind. Why did this look so familiar? I really shouldn't have been going through this stuff, getting my fingerprints everywhere. That sounds like a criminal. Blood on the wall. It smelled fresh and sickening. I realized there was blood on my shoes and pants. Oh man, I had to get out of there. If that man died in the hallway, what was the blood doing there? It's a good question. It's a really good question, buddy. Downstairs. I noticed that I limped as I moved down the stairs. How did I hurt my leg, I wondered. All I could really recall was coming home, seeing Rachel. I was upset. She looked afraid. I shook my head and tried to clear it. I knew I should head downstairs. Try to find a way out. A thin gray mouse was stuck in a trap. It looked frantic but exhausted. Yeah, sure, why not? There you go, mouse. A collection of rusty tools. These looked like they'd seen a lot of use and were caked in damp-smelling dirt. Why weren't they in a shed? This was an odd place to keep yard tools. What would they have been used for in here? There's no way to take them or anything, is there? Nope. Okay. I found a picture of a couple. It looked like it had been moved a lot. There seemed to be a switch behind it. Did I push the switch? Yeah. It depressed smoothly into the wall. I heard a faraway click somewhere. Something must have opened somewhere. No, you don't say. The shelf was full of books on local history and hunting. Seemed like the owner of the house really knew the area. There were scribbles of all kinds on random scraps of paper and notes about some kind of water tower. Did he mean the one by the old train yard? An old dining table covered in dirty dishes for two people. There were dozens of beer cans and other liquor bottles among the dishes. The smell was turning my stomach. How long had this been here rotting? The man upstairs didn't look like he'd been dead a long time. A black and white photo. Looked like the man upstairs and his wife, I guessed. There was no reason for me to keep this. I slipped the photo into my pocket. Maybe this would help me find some answers. Okay. Go farther downstairs then. I looked like hell. My clothes were dirty and torn, and there was mud caked all over my shoes. Had I been sleepwalking again? Was that how I got to that house? The bathroom was spotless. Everything had been wiped to a sheen. I wondered if it was the man's wife who did the cleaning, or him. There was a photo development tray lying on the floor. Some leftover negatives were sticking out, but they were pretty blurry. I thought I saw what looked like treetops. It seemed odd that the tray had been left there, considering how clean the rest of the bathroom was. There's nothing else to do in here? Whatever. The front door was blocked by a pile of furniture. I knew I had to find another way out. Okay. The door was taped up and seemed to be stuck. By the smell, I guessed it led to the kitchen. I gave the door a hard shove, and to my surprise, it cracked open. That tape ain't gonna keep the BiscuitNinja out of this bitch. There were sheets of paper all over the kitchen table. It looked like a series of names were written down, but they were too smudged to read. I could only make out a few of the notes. It didn't make much sense at the time. The smell of old dishes and moldy food was dizzying. Okay, there's no other reason to be in here, I guess. The box looked heavy, but there were marks on the floor. It had obviously been moved before. Maybe I had found a way out. I must have moved it, right? I heaved the box forward and it finally gave. There was a ladder going underground where the box was. A dank smell rose from the passage. I looked again at the photo I found in the house. The couple looked distant, like they didn't want to be in the same picture. I wondered where the wife was. My leg was in terrible shape, but I had to get out. This dude's got like some serious thought control problems, ADHD or something. Footprints in the dirt. Looked like more than one kind and a lot of traffic. Whatever this place was obviously used a lot. Places all over were marked on the old map of town. The industrial area near the river, various houses, and even the water tower near the old rail station. The guy upstairs must have done this. But what was his interest in the water tower? Some of the markings matched the scribbles I saw on the bookshelf upstairs. Newspaper clippings from the local paper. They were all about murders in the town over the last few years. Wait. There were photos. Photos of our house. What the hell was that about? Maybe I should have looked around more. Tried to find some kind of information. Oh, Rachel. Please be okay. I wanted to rush home, but I had to find a way out first, and I need to see what else was down there. A work table, covered in papers, dirt, and a handgun. I hated guns. I tucked the small handgun into my pocket. Its weight was somehow reassuring. Why did I take the gun? Because you're not a dumbass. Because I'm controlling you. It was so dark down there, and the air smelled stale and putrid. I couldn't believe what I saw. What was this place? The desk looked old and was caked with grime. On it was a stack of old faded paper covered with what looked like names. They were scratched out and illegible notes were written beside them in faded blue ink. I could only make out a few letters. None of it made any sense to me. Nothing about Rachel or me was written there. Maybe I need to keep looking. There looked to be bones half dug into the ground, and the remains looked old. The faded clothes that stuck up amongst the dirt looked familiar. They looked like the clothes that woman was wearing in the photo I found. Was this the man's wife? I wondered what would I have found if I dug deeper. But we're not going to do it, so who knows. Some kind of homemade rack, slung together with poorly cut wood and rope. It was caked with old blood. Somebody didn't actually use that, did they? The smell in that room was like old grease and rot. I wasn't getting any closer to finding anything useful. Rusted hooks like the kind you'd find in a butcher hung from the ceiling. They looked pitted and worn from heavy use. That man upstairs, did he do this? I was getting more nauseated the longer I stayed there. I felt sick and weak, like I hadn't eaten for days. Crudely made shelves. They looked like they were holding cans of some kind of corrosive. The labels were worn and slick, but I could still see the warnings. The slight fumes that still emanated from the cans made me dizzy. Man, this guy's a little bitch. It looked like a cage. It was small, but there was something coating the bottom. Something wet. The place was getting worse all the time. I knew I had to keep moving. Yeah, keep moving. Come on. Boxes. Some kind of old boxes. They look like they were years old. Wait a minute. These boxes had old clothes in them. Clothes I remembered throwing out after Rachel and I moved to town. What the hell were they doing there? If I was scared before, I was terrified now. Why were there photos of our old house there, and these clothes? Was that why I was there? I checked my back pocket and realized my wallet was missing. Did I come to that house, or did somebody bring me? Uh-oh, what's that noise? Bats. Yeah. Suck it, bats. I remembered noticing the broken ladder. I had to be careful. Yeah, real careful. Yeah, okay. Oh, what's that? There was a rope hanging there. I wasn't sure how sturdy it was. Maybe the rope would make that broken ladder easier to descend. There's a skeleton in the closet there. The rope I found would have let me climb down to the broken ladder safely. I could hear a faint hum, and the smell from before was starting to get worse. A bunch of old newspapers, wheat pasted together. A message had been hastily smeared on it. Keep out. Danger due to cave-in. I wanted nothing more than to get out of there. I could still feel the faint impression of the rope I had slid down as I pressed against the heavy metal door. It was probably for the best I hadn't jumped. The ache in my leg was bad enough as it was. If I could have, though, I would have run straight out of those awful tunnels. Who would keep such a place? At least I thought I had found that old handgun. It seemed to work, and from the smell of it, it had been used already. I kept the gun in my pocket. It seemed a familiar weight there. An exposed ventilation shaft. Maybe someone crawled through there. But it was so high up that it must have been a sore landing. My leg ached just thinking about it. There was dirt on the ground. It looked wet and there was grass smeared within it. Odd, there was a similar dirt on my own shoes. I could hear a faint trickling sound like water. What was that? Go up the ladder first. Disgusting. It was a mess of filthy garbage bags. There were rips and tears in most of the bags. What looked like an old videotape was sticking out. I wasn't sure what I hoped to discover with the tape, but I took it anyway. A kitchen knife, covered in drying blood. Thinking about it made me sick. I didn't even want to touch it. I slipped the knife in my boot since I had the gun in my pocket. Did I really need all this? Yes. Yes, you did. The door was locked. There was a musty smell from inside. Okay. I wasn't sure, but I thought it was some kind of regulator. I had no idea how it worked. Through the dust, I could see handprints from previous use, probably from whoever worked in those sewers. I wasn't sure what those valves are for. What are these valves? Okay. Turning those valves must have drained the water that was in this room. There was a ladder I could reach. Looked like the water drained out that grate in the wall. There was a small metal key left floating in the shallow pool of rancid water. I pocketed the small key, but it was so odd shape I had no idea what it might open. The safety poster had definitely seen better days. How old was that facility? The faded paper was yellow and dusty, but there it had obviously been wiped off recently. The door was locked. I could see a faint light within. There was a security camera in the room. There must have been a way to see what had happened. Maybe the VHS tape I found could be useful. I couldn't help but wonder if someone was watching me from the other side. I found another dead body, a sewer worker. By the wounds all over his face and body, I figured he'd been stabbed repeatedly. There was a keyring sticking out of the man's pocket. I thought about the knife I'd found with some disgust as I carefully picked the keys from his pocket. I was almost worried he was going to grab me. I was feeling even more sick from seeing another dead man. I didn't want to get any more blood on my clothes. I tried a bunch of the keys on the keyring I had found on that sewer worker, and one of them seemed to fit. A collection of stale liquor bottles covered the floor. That room didn't seem like much of a place for drinking. What was the point? The wall was littered with dozens of old, faded papers. Whoever did this was obsessed with some local murders. According to some of the clippings, bodies had been found in ravines, in the forest, and in one case dumped in the back of an abandoned pickup truck. I couldn't be sure, but I thought some of these articles had also been pasted up back in those tunnels. Did that sewer worker find this room? Is that why he was killed? A faded receipt was half trembled on the floor. It was from the local train station and was for 2 tickets. I didn't know what use it could be. I neatly folded the soiled receipt and slipped it into my front pocket. The shelf full of security tapes was strictly organized, though covered in dust. Looked like the tape I found was one that was missing from the shelf. I wondered what was on the tape and why it was thrown out. There was a dusty VCR on the security desk. I wondered what was on the VHS tape I found. Oh no. The video showed a man right there in the sewers being attacked. The tape looked fuzzy and stretched like somebody had tampered with it. It looked like there could have been 2 men. I couldn't stand to watch that video again. This must have been the other end of that ventilation shaft. Whoever used it could have gotten past that flooded room with this. Clever, but why go through all the trouble? Would I need that gun or that knife before the end? Both weighed me down and aggravated my leg as I climbed that old ladder. The thought of that videotape gave me chills. Who was that didn't want to be seen? Was it the same person that hid all those clippings away in the locked room? Suddenly, the awful smell of that sewer gave way to the pine-scented blast of fresh air. Hey, we're out. Eyes. An old ladder leading up to the ancient water tower. The ladder needed to be extended so I could climb it. I popped the latch and brought the ladder down. In a patch of smeared dirt and grass, there was a beat-up old wallet. I thought it was mine. I slid the filthy wallet into my back pocket. I noticed it didn't contain any kind of gun permit. In fact, it didn't contain any cards or ID of any kind. I thought I should recover my credit card and my driver's license at least. From the railing, I could see over the woods and down to the entrance of the sewers. Had I come through here before? If I did, someone definitely could have seen me. It was getting cool up there, and I shivered with an uneasy sense of what was to come. How did I get home from here? I tried the little key I had fished out of the murky puddle in the sewers. It fit, and I heaved open the rusty door. The wind was picking up a bit. The night air had become strangely chilly. Okay. The old train station was quiet as a tomb. The only sound was that of the increasing wind buffeting the decrepit structure. An old ticket booth that looked fairly ruined. Inside the ticket window were sheets of paper and... Wait. What were these? Train receipts? I thought the receipt I had picked up might match these, but of course not. This station had been closed for years. The ticket must have been for a newer station that opened up on the other side of town after this one was abandoned. However, I noticed a series of fresher-looking paper covered in tiny notes, scribbles, and diagrams. It looked like someone had been leafing through the old ledgers, looking for something, a name perhaps. Yeah, I got a trophy. Escape route. Whatever that means. An old map encased in glass hung on the wall. It was the train routes connected to that old station. As I looked at it, it seemed familiar. Of course, the map I found in those tunnels had similar locations marked. And the notes I found on the other man's bookshelf, his notes mentioned the water tower and even this train yard. What was he doing? Coming back here? The sorry condition of that place seemed sad somehow, but also ominous. Ooh. We're back outside. The old train was ripped open and hanging from a shred of metal, as well as the broken fence was a dark stained patch of cloth. It looked synthetic, like some kind of outerwear. Inside the train's shell I could see a few faint impacts, like wounds. Could they have been bullet marks? Was somebody shot there? The ground was well worn. I couldn't really make anything out. I realized I was touching the gun I had found as I thought. It was getting colder out there and I had to keep moving. Okay. I've basically accomplished nothing here. This must have been the entrance to the forest that was mentioned on the map I had seen. Whoever was poking around in those tunnels underneath that man's house had scribbled notes on this place, but I couldn't make them out. Here, the sign pointed out various campsites and walking paths within the woods. It mentioned a river and maybe a washroom, but the rest was too faded to see clearly. I almost wished I had paid more attention to those crazy scribblings. Maybe I would have been less nervous about entering the dark forest. Trampled into the dirt and grass was a plastic card of some kind. I brushed it off and was surprised to see it was my credit card. I wasn't sure if it was still usable, but it was mine. I pocketed the credit card. Hopefully I could find my driver's license too. Through the fence, I could see a dilapidated building. I wondered if I could find my way around. There was a fire pit there. It was still a bit warm, and a few embers still burned at the bottom. Was someone else out in these woods too? Why did they abandon their campsite? Two folding camping chairs were on the ground. One was knocked over. There were a couple cans of beer spilled on the ground. Whoever was here left this place in a hurry. But why? The cheap dome tent slept 2 people. I shone my flashlight inside and could see some bedrolls, 2 backpacks, and a cooler. I felt like if I kept rooting through the campsite, someone would walk in on me. The grimy sink had a small patch in it that looked almost clean. There wasn't much in the way of clean water there, but the sink did work. The musty wooden plank propped up the stall door. It didn't really seem useful. I wasn't sure why, but I took the plank. The sign was the same as the first one I had seen. This must have been the exit to the other side of the woods. I didn't know who was camping back there, but I couldn't bear to stick around and look for them. I just wanted to get out of there. I had finally found the exit. Once I left, I knew I never wanted to return there. Well, I'm not leaving yet then, because I haven't explored everything. There were some personal effects shoved back into the rock. Wait, there was a notebook there too. Inside the cheap dollar store notebook was page after one page of names and lists. None of it made much sense. The newest page contained several names. Rachel. Her name was last on the list, and it had a mark beside it in blue ink. The names Daphne and Olivia had been crossed out in the same blue ink. Cheryl, Heather, and Rose had also been crossed out, but these marks looked older and more faded. A dry old picnic table sat lonely amongst the trees. It had carvings and marks from years of previous campers. As I tried to read some of the names and the marks, I idly thumbed the knife I'd found. If I wanted to, I could have carved something onto that table. With a few crude strokes, I etched a simple design in the wood. R plus H. I felt like a teenager defacing the table. I read some of the other names and notes on the table's surface. Seemed like the table had seen a lot of use over the years. The plank I found was long enough to form a crude bridge, but I wasn't sure if it would hold. Two bodies, 2 young women, were half dug into a hasty, shallow grave between the trees. The younger-looking one was still face up, her dead eyes gleaming against my flashlight. They deserved better than that. I tried to cover them up a bit more, and I closed the younger woman's eyes. I fashioned a crude marker. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I had to do something. The girls weren't carrying ID, so I couldn't determine their names. I only hoped that whoever had done this had done it quickly. I wondered now if they had a phone or something at their campsite. Maybe I could call for help. Well, I doubt it, considering. Yeah, terrible tragedy. Got a trophy. Alright, let's leave here. Through the dense trees, I could finally start to see some light. I must have been at the edge of the forest, but I wasn't sure where the path ahead of me led. I could almost feel the cryptic notebook in my pocket as I tried to think about what it could mean. And where were the campers who had abandoned their site? Would I meet them too? Though the path ahead of me was less dense, I still felt guarded and wary. Who knew what was ahead? As I stepped through the gate, I suddenly recognized the auto parts factory where I had worked as a machinist for all those years. The plant had closed almost 3 years ago now. Times were better then. I thought I could hear a faint rustling behind me. Maybe it was just the wind. I found the body of a security guard, just doing his job, no doubt. His face was covered with blood from some kind of head wound. I wondered, was this flashlight his? I saw the blunt wound on the guard's head and looked again at the flashlight I was carrying. Oh no, please. Dug into the ground was a cracked old watch. First my wallet and now this. The watch was useless, but I put it on my wrist anyway. I might be a murderer. One of the lockers hung open. Its contents were tossed around like someone had been looking for something. Old work clothes had been picked through, and a few photos and notes had been ripped off the door and spread around. The door was locked shut, and there was a little electronic box under the handle. A sign was pasted to the front that said, "Danger, closed for repairs." There was a large power box with 5 lights on it. Cables burst out of the box, snaking off to other parts of the factory. The metal was starting to wear, and cobwebs had collected on the corners. The box wasn't receiving power. It didn't look like the power was on yet. The door was locked tight. It seemed to be connected to the power box beside it. Every part of this plant smelled old and rotted. I noticed the old bulletin board on the wall. The board contained yellowed clippings of newspaper cartoons and notices. There were notes to and from the guys that worked there. One of them was to Norman, who was one of the older guys on the line. Norman took over a general store after the factory closed. He, Rachel, and I would get lunch every now and then. Rachel liked him because he seemed more positive despite the setback. I don't think I could say the same about me. Power panel. Looked like it was shut off. Power panel still wasn't working. Did I try it again? The panel seemed to be working again. The open locker was stuffed with dirty work clothes and old boots. There was a photo of a woman taped to the inside, but it was scratched out and the face was unrecognizable. That woman's photo. I knew I had to get back to Rachel to find out what happened. It was shut tight. There was a rusty looking card slot on the side. Our old break table. The layer of dust and grime only made seeing this sting more. Looked like some beer bottles had been used on the table recently. I wondered, was that guard using this as a break room of his own? This was Norman's locker. The door was dented like someone had punched it. I don't remember him doing that when we worked there. My head ached, and I recalled the last time Norman, Rachel, and I had all had lunch together. Rachel seemed so much more at ease when we all hung out. A utility shelf crammed with mismatched tools and items. There was a claw hammer on the shelf. As I took the hammer, I noticed it wasn't as dusty as the rest of the tools on the shelf. Being useful and productive there in this plant, that was all I ever wanted. When the factory closed, everything got worse. The locker was a complete mess. Hidden at the bottom, though, was a magnetic card. I slipped the key card into my pocket. From the musty smell, I assumed that no one had used this locker for a long time. I struck with the hammer. The old wooden boards came apart easily. After I had removed the planks, I left the hammer on the floor. Why would you do that? This was my locker there in the factory. It stank of booze. There was a picture of Rachel on the inside. It looked like it had been torn up. I thought I had taken that picture home when the factory closed. This room was nothing but bad memories. There was a mess of empty booze bottles. I wondered if that man in the house had something to do with this. He sure had a lot of alcohol at his place. Maybe that guard outside caught him hiding up here. Was this game made by a child? Look at all these empty booze bottles. Another smudge of dirt, similar to the one I found in those sewers, was on the floor. It didn't look like the footprints were mine, but they were probably too faint to tell. A large pile of building materials and debris blocked the way. The factory floor never did get the repairs it needed. We closed too soon for that to happen. A rusted old regulator of some kind sat dusty and unused against the wall. Within the dust there were deep scratches. Planks, tools, and broken up parts blocked any further passage. The factory was like a tomb now. It never got repaired and we never came back. A rack of flashlights hung on the wall. One of them was missing. Wait a minute. They were exactly the same as the flashlight I was carrying. I turned my own over and looked at the bottom. Judging by the label, it definitely could have come from that rack. The stale scent of the old factory gave way to the brisk outdoor of pine trees and dirt. I was back outside, though I wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. The path beyond was dark and my flashlight barely illuminated anything. I wonder if it had really been taken from the factory. If so, how did I get it? That poor guard. He was probably just doing his job. Maybe he knew what was going on in that boarded up room. If he did, he wouldn't be telling that tale to anybody. I hope the path led back into town. I need to find some help. A pickup had smashed into the guardrail and stood silent. Was this the truck that those newspaper clippings mentioned? Was there really a body found here too? I looked closer at the tailgate and I could see a series of dried streaks down its back. Inside the truck was dried blood and broken glass. I was surprised this hadn't been towed away yet. The garbage bin was a disgusting mess of rotten food in slick black bags. I saw a thin greenish corner poking out from one of the bags. It was my driver's license. It looked damaged. I cleaned the card off as best I could. It looked pretty beat up. I was amazed to have found my credit card, and now this. I tucked the card into my wallet next to my credit card. Did somebody steal this from me? I wondered why they would have stashed it there. Sounded like it was going to start raining again. I had entered Norman's place. This was the back of the store that he ran. It was oddly quiet, except for this faint sound of a television. The entrance to the front of the store was locked from the inside. Looked like I couldn't just pop it open. It needed a key. There was a bit of blood on the keyhole. What was this? Looked like a pull chain hanging from the ceiling. I wondered where it led. I gave the chain a single tug and a simple folding ladder to the attic popped down. The TV still flickered some indecipherable channel. Couldn't make out what was on the screen, but that glow just gave me the chills. Oh no. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Norman, my coworker and one of the few friends I had in this town, lay dead beside his armchair. His face and shirt were covered in blood. It looked like he'd been shot trying to get up. His eyes were still wide with shock. Norman, you deserve better than this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to give him peace or if I just couldn't stand to think about any more about what was going on. Quickly, I closed Norman's eyes. The poor bastard. There was a large cardboard box that hadn't been sealed. Inside the old cardboard box was a pile of clothes, photos, and even shoes. As I looked closer, I realized they were Rachel's. What were you doing here, Rachel? Were you responsible for poor Norman downstairs? The items in the box only made my head spin more. I desperately needed answers. Yeah, huh? What's that? Okay. I guess this was Norman's kitchen table. He kept it clean enough, but there were water rings from 2 cups still there on the wood. I'd never been to Norman's place before. At least I didn't remember ever doing so. The kitchen trash bin smelled fresh. I found a hairpin amongst the rotting food and trash and pocketed it. A hairpin, good. I can use that to pick the lock. I wasn't entirely surprised to find this there. It was one of Rachel's old fall coats. I always wondered what happened to it. How long it had been there. There was a little bit of something dark staining the sleeve. Inside the cabinet was a small but impressive collection of hunting rifles, shotguns, and even a few items I didn't think were legal here. One of the slots on the rack was empty. The gun I had found seemed to match the others there. If the handgun was Norman's, what the hell was he doing with it? I carefully pushed the piece back in place, and it felt like a great burden lifted. Norman, a close call. Got a trophy, woo! Norman, what were you doing with all these? Okay, so now I don't have a gun. I still have a knife. Hopefully nobody attacks me that I needed to shoot. I used the hairpin to pick the lock. The hairpin snapped in half, so I threw it away. The general store was small, but it was clean. It had the usual things: postcards, snacks, magazines, and canned goods. I never went there much. Rachel usually stopped by after work if we needed anything. The register was mostly empty, and a fat stack of travel magazines sat beside it. I wondered if someone had robbed the place before killing Norman upstairs. The icebox seemed to be unplugged. It must have been off for a while. Most of its contents were half melted. What was the matter, Norman? Cheated on your hydro bills too? There were various postcards from the area, especially from the tourist traps. One of the postcards showed an old black and white photo of the water tower. It looked to be in much better shape then. Of all the postcards, that one seemed to be the most popular. There were only a few left. It had been weeks since I'd last seen Norman, and finding him that way still left me cold. Thinking of him slumped against that chair only cemented my reassurance in getting rid of that gun. It looked like someone had taken the piece from his store. But why was it in those tunnels? As I stepped outside, I recalled that dusty old box of clothes in Norman's attic. I felt like I only discovered more questions, no answers. But I was close to home. It was time to find out the truth. It was locked. This wasn't the right gate. What do you mean the right gate? Gate was locked tight. This wasn't my house. The neighborhood's local postbox. A letter was sticking out as if someone hadn't pushed it all the way in. I knew it wasn't right, but the envelope was addressed to Norman. There was no return address, but the handwriting looked familiar. I took a deep breath and tore open the package. Norman, I'm sending this to you in a letter because I'm afraid to tell you this in person. What we did, well, it was wrong. My husband isn't an easy man to be with, but he is my husband and your friend. I need some time to sort this out away from you both. I'm going away for a while. I'm going to tell him, Norman, so you don't think you can hold that against me. Maybe we'll work it out. I'm not sure I even want to, but he deserves at least that much. Goodbye. I didn't know what to think. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. I had to get home. I just had to. I had entered our backyard. The rain gave me a terrible sense of foreboding, and it chilled me through my clothes. I was expectant, but also afraid. I held my breath as I approached our back door. I was terrified to step inside. The house was painfully quiet. The only sound was my own breathing, ragged and strained. I flicked the light switch by the door. The power was off. I remembered having breakfast here on this very table. Was that yesterday or sometime before? The table was clean. It hadn't been used any time recently. The door to the basement, it was locked. Where did I put the damn key? There was a small pile of mail on the floor in front of the mail slot. How long had I been away? Why hadn't Rachel picked this up? Most of the contents were bills. There was a credit card bill there. I ripped the bill open and read it. To my surprise, it said something about canceling my credit card due to non-payment. What the hell? The front door was locked from the inside. I couldn't go out, though. I needed to see if Rachel was here. I found the last missing piece from my wallet. The old photo of Rachel and I stared back at me, reminding me of better times. It didn't make me feel terribly comfortable. I replaced the photo in my wallet, feeling like I got a part of my life back. Still, the image made me uneasy. Why had I thrown it away? Yeah, stolen identity trophy. Our television. I had purchased it before I knew I was going to lose my job. I felt pretty guilty about it afterward, but by then it was too late. Rachel was pretty angry about that, I realized. Whatever. Gives a shit about that. The door was stuck shut. There was an old-fashioned keyhole underneath the handle. Well, what do you fucking do? The books there were half mine, half Rachel's. Hey, now that I looked more closely, it looked like that man in the house had some of the same books as I did. One book in particular seemed a bit odd. I remembered owning it, but not that edition. My wife's. Rachel's suitcase was sitting on the bed. It was closed, but I had a feeling what was in it. Inside Rachel's suitcase were a few days' worth of clothes, some personal effects, and a train ticket. As I stared at the ticket, I could feel myself flush with anger and resentment. The date and time matched the receipt I had found. Rachel, why? Were you really going to run away with Norman? Was I really such a monster? Our hallway mirror had been shattered, its pieces scattered around the floor. I couldn't really make myself out anymore. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Our sink, which needed to be replaced. One of the taps always stuck. I hadn't got around to fixing it yet. That old house was charming for sure, but it wasn't always easy. We were lucky enough to get a house with one of those wonderful old claw-footed bathtubs. It seemed impractical at times, but it was part of what made that house home. A lot of kind of useless dialogue in this. My laptop had been left on and only had a tiny bit of power left. On the screen was a website about the old water tower. There was a key in the top drawer of the desk. I pocketed the key. The laptop was warm. It had been running for a while. This must be for the basement. I unlocked the basement door, yep. Okay. There were old Christmas decorations in the box. Couldn't even remember our last Christmas. The garbage bags were stuffed with old paint cans and supplies. There was a dirty old key there. I took the small key and tried to remember what it unlocked. Looked like there was plaster and an old trowel in here too. There were old clothes, tools, and other things we'd obviously hadn't thrown out yet. We had way too much junk. I had put up this divider wall last summer so we could create a separate room in the basement. I hadn't finished it yet, so the door was stuck and the drywall was poorly installed. I might have been able to break through if I found something heavy enough. The grimy key in the basement I found. The grimy key I'd found in the basement unlocked the door. It looked like the room had been tossed around. The furniture was a mess. Did somebody break in here? There was an old crowbar on the floor. I lifted the heavy crowbar. I appreciated its weight. What the fuck does that mean? Did I break through the wall? With a heave, I swung the crowbar at the wall, smashed a hole large enough to step through. As I stepped through the broken wall, my breath caught in my throat. This was it. Was Rachel down there? Was she okay? A filthy-looking pile of rags had been dumped in the corner. The stench of them was awful and made my eyes water. I was terrified to even touch the pile to see what lay within. But I knew I had to. I had come this far. After all this searching, after all I had seen, when I looked within the rags, did I finally find my Rachel? Oh no. My hands trembled as I pulled back the layers of cloth. There at the center, under all the dirt and mess, was my beloved, my Rachel. Her arms were bruised all over and slashed repeatedly. Her clothes were ripped and torn, and even through all of that sickening blood, it was obvious she had been stabbed to death. The knife I had carried all this way suddenly seemed like a poison. What had happened, Rachel? Who did this to you? I thought about all I had seen, and wondered if any of it could could help me figure out who had done this. And when I couldn't stay there any longer, I stepped away on shaky legs and made my way back upstairs. Reluctantly, exhausted from my journey, I could no longer resist the urge to close my eyes. Grim Discovery Trophy. Booyah. Maybe I would use some of Rachel's travel books and go find some place to go. No matter what, I needed some kind of escape. It was my wallet, with its contents intact. Either I dropped that stuff or somebody else did. Maybe I was sleepwalking again, or maybe somebody stole it from me. Norman's store, that forest, the water tower. Was I at all those places before? I didn't see how it could have happened any other way. I must have been the one to lose my wallet and its contents. But what does that mean? There, that was decided. This was the old photo of that other man and his wife, I assumed. I found it in that house. I recalled those faded remains I had found deep underneath his house. What had he done there? Well, what did I think? Was that man involved in this whole mess somehow? I wasn't sure, but the poor old bastard was good and dead. He was a victim, not a criminal. Within the few broken pieces that remained of that mirror, I could see my face had grown pale and weak. I couldn't bear to look again. It was like I didn't actually expect a reflection. I felt empty and drained. Perhaps I would never know how that mirror came to be broken. Was it by Rachel's assailant, or by Rachel herself? The thought lingered and would haunt me forever. The reflection in that grimy glass was only a shadow, a whisper. The quiet in that room unnerved me terribly. I still loved the old-time charm of that claw-footed bathtub, though it seemed like cold comfort then. Rachel loved this part of the house. It was the key card I found at the bottom of that factory locker. I never did bother to use it. Oh, son of a bitch. Someone had been going through those lockers and poking around the plant. Still, it didn't quite add up. Was I the one who had been going back to the factory? It looked that way, didn't it? That locker room, I had given up drinking, but the laptop had finally run out of power. It was the letter I had taken from the postbox. Rachel, were you really having an affair with Norman? But why? I didn't think things were that bad. In the letter, Rachel seemed concerned. She almost seemed worried what Norman might do. Did he do that to Rachel? I was sure of it. She wanted to end their affair, and that bastard, he killed her for it. A lot of it made sense. Norman was clearly seeing Rachel a lot, so he had plenty of time to plan it out. He knew where we lived, obviously. Is that why Rachel looked so scared when I came home that day? What had happened to me? Did Norman knock me out or something? I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to put this whole mess behind me. My old office safe sat on the floor. I used to keep tax records and other important documents in it. I used a digital passcode lock, but I didn't have the code. Maybe I'd left it somewhere. I leafed through the notebook I had taken from the forest. In it were names that had been written down. I recalled the names I saw scratched on the old desk deep within those musty tunnels. Was the man in that house really up to something? It seemed like I had seen all there was. Maybe I thought I was ready to go back into the basement. The mail still sat there heaped on the floor. How long had Rachel been lying in the basement? If I was guilty, I could take this to a warm, safe place and do something about it. I took the knife and kept it firmly in my hand. Now that I stood there, I realized I couldn't go back into that room again. I had already seen too much. I needed to put an end to this situation one way or another. I knew I needed to escape the nightmare. What about the knife I still carried? I wondered, even if I left, would it really be over? Living in this town hadn't been easy. The plan had helped in some way to stay grounded. Kept me in line, gave me something to do, helped me get away from my past. When the factory closed, everything changed. I guess that was when I had started sleepwalking, disappearing for hours at a time. I had MRIs and piles of doctor's reports, but nothing seemed to help, not even drinking. But I swear I'd tried to give it up. I know it. Sleepwalking never really went away, though. But I know Rachel had tried. I know she had tried to be there for me, even when everything was falling apart. This night had unearthed terrible truths. But I knew it was a final act of long-standing horror I'd been living. Waking up in that house tonight was the final cruelty. I wish I'd remained unconscious in that room forever. I wasn't sure what had happened to that other man in the house I had found in that house. He seemed to me more a victim. But what was his role in all this? After making it out of those tunnels, I thought those sewers might feel safer. I was wrong. The security tape I had watched showed someone being attacked by what looked like two people. But who was it that was attacked? I had found the contents of my wallet scattered throughout town. Why the hell had I been out there? Had my sleepwalking gone to some new extreme? The thought that I couldn't account for my whereabouts, but knew I had been to that forest, and even Norman's place. Well, it was terrifying. I didn't know what that meant, but at least I had recovered my things. Hopefully, I thought, that would cover my tracks, so I wouldn't be blamed for all this. Deep within those woods, though, was where things became truly awful. Finding that notebook only made things worse. Rachel's name had been on the list. So what terrible plot was she a part of? There's a similar list of names on that desk back in those tunnels. What was the connection? It was clear, at least, that I had been the one going back to that factory. I must have been sleepwalking or something. But what the hell was I doing there? I had given up drinking, hadn't I? So what was going on in that boarded up room? Suddenly, my stomach started to turn. Was I responsible for that dead guard? After the factory, But all I had found were more horrors and more questions. Now that I really consider it, that's when I should have seen it coming. Norman, you were dead. And it was damn hard to feel bad about that. It was clear you and Rachel were more than just friends. But obviously whatever had been going on had gone badly. So why did you kill her? Did she want out of whatever you two were getting into? Were you responsible for other murders? And of those other horrible things that had gone on in that town? I would find no peace, that much was certain. But this way, I didn't have to look you in the eye, or sit through some kind of trial and wonder what was going through your head. When I had marched through the rain towards home, I desperately clung to the hope that this would end. And I guess in a way it did. But how could I have known how hopeless it all was? I had started to feel as disoriented as when I sleptwalked. To think of it now, when I entered from the backyard, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. No sounds, no movement. It was like the entire house had been holding its breath, waiting for me. But Rachel, oh Rachel, no one could have prepared for that. Norman, I will never forgive you for what you've done. Your death is no comfort. I only wish it could have been me who made you breathe your last. For whatever reason you had, I could never have fathomed that this would be the end. My Rachel was dead. She was gone. And soon, too, I would be. As I swung open the door and stepped out into the air, I caught the scent of wet grass and fog. Rachel, my beautiful wife. Just the thought of her again, cold and inert, shook me from head to toe. What would I do now? Who could I turn to? It would only be a matter of time before the police got involved, before the neighbors knew. The front lawn was soft and giving beneath my feet. I couldn't shake the urge that I shouldn't stand there, but rather that I should run. Well, okay. Slipping away, yeah, I got a trophy. Guess we finished it. I don't see why we need to turn the lights off if there was literally nothing scary in this game at all. Home is dedicated to my wife Nancy. Watch your back.